Do the introductions then quickly as we wait for these couple of last minutes to join in. I'm happy to go first if that's all right. So my name's Wolf. I'm the game designer for Void's Drift. I've been brought on by Jack, and I've sort of had, I guess you would call me an industry veteran, though I don't really like that word so much, because I always think of 50-year-olds, right? And they've been working on like Ultima Online and whatnot, and with big wise beards and all that. So yeah, so I've worked previously with Rockstar North and Quantum Dreams, and I'm happy to be part of this project. And Jack, if you want to take it from here.
Hopefully that people know who I am by now. I have been on this. I did start the studio and the project and everything. But if you don't know who I am, you've just joined in and goes, "Who's this? Who's Jack?"
Or for the YouTube audience, yeah.
Oh yeah, YouTube audience as well. I'm Jack. I'm the founder and the guy who creates the whole project Void's Adrift. And also in charge of getting everyone on board and recruiting the developers. I'm also the coder, the modeler, the painter, the texture artist. I was the music guy, but MK took that role.
Hi, how's it going? The lead composer at your service, MK Prince.
Sort of the musical producer.
All the fancy music that people have heard so far.
Yeah, nothing has been quite needed yet, so I haven't been active at all. But as soon as the worlds are built, as soon as I get some references, I'm gonna be sitting down on a piano, me and my samples, hours at a time. Gonna be hunched over like Gollum.
He's also like rum and whiskey and wine. They get better all the time. So the longer we leave him not doing anything, the better he's becoming.
Yeah, I think that also kind of nicely transitions to sort of just our general sort of beginning conversation here as the development team, and definitely in terms of what has been the plan going forward and what has been sort of the progress in the past couple of weeks is sort of utilizing my experience in working with a team to turn this from somewhat that it was like I suppose you'd call like a passion, a group of passionate individuals coming together for a project and sort of people working on it in incrementally in their own free time and whatnot, to now thinking about, okay, we have a vision, we have goals, we have ambitions. How do we use our sort of experience and passion in a more professional way? And that's kind of what the progress has been. Is no longer is it just a passion project. Now it's becoming a full-on indie dev studio, game dev studio. So in terms of where you've got people like MK sitting in and producing the music, and perhaps there's not been a lot of I guess professional delegation, and there's been sort of not knowing how things are run. That's kind of where we've completely readjusted, we've cleaned up house, and now progress is kind of, I guess, synonymous with what you'd find in any other game studio. So the pipelines and the processes are very, very similar. So progress moving forward will be a lot smoother. People understand their roles better. People will feel like, and obviously from the community members, it will feel like, yes, okay, they sort of know what they're doing, hopefully. And, we can expect things that are regular, constant updates, keeping guys on track. And one of the things that has always been an issue with me, and I'm sure a lot of you have noticed with some studios, that there's not a lot of transparency between the developers and the community members. So I think having things like this Q&A and consistent updates and devlogs. For those that want to read them, they can find the information that they want, and where development progress is at. So, Jack, if there's anything on that regard that you'd like to...
Yeah, transparency is key these days. A lot of people hide behind a name and a picture, and they don't really express what's going on really these days. A lot of game studios, I mean, the major big AAA game studios, they tend to don't host Q&As, don't really interact with their community as much. It's more about letting the news magazines and companies do that for them. We want to sort of change that up a little bit and be more open. If someone has a question, we'll answer it to our best abilities. Host more Q&As. Be more like a media outlet, really, as a report on what's going on in the game, report what we're doing, and make sure the whole community knows, okay, well, this is cool what they're doing. And not only that, is recently, obviously, since the very start, I've been posting, and obviously MK with the music as well, and a few others, our modelers, going through, and as we make stuff, we're really proud of what we make and sharing it from the minute it was concepted to the moment it's finished. A lot of our models have been created as renders of models, and you get to see them before they're in the game. So you can go, hey, that's cool. Or having open mind is you can talk about these things before they get added. If we make something and you go, hey, that looks cool, but wouldn't it be cooler if you had this already? Or actually, I don't really like that model. I think having a voice and then having the developers go, hey, that's a great, you've spoke about it, and changing upon the community's answers, I think that really does add to the value of the game.
Yeah,
So,
it definitely is having that sort of community input. I think, especially with, if you think about other games that are in this sort of stage, usually they're not really open to the public. And I think maybe there's a reason why a lot of studios do that, and it's because obviously a lot of things are set to change and people's expectations can build up and sort of get out of hand and whatnot. But I think having this community in place where a lot of our members, we're very grateful for backing us and supporting us early on in this project, and some of the members have been in for 2 years, longer than me, right? Much longer than me. And having their views and being able to use them as like some kind of I suppose focus group, right, is I think could be an incredibly valuable and like unique really experience, right? Is because we're not just sort of making the game, and as we look to formally employ people and all that, it's not we're not just making the game in the four walls of our studio. We're making a game with thousands of members across the world, and I think that's quite cool, and that's one of the
it's not
draws
just
that draw into this.
it's not just our experience, it's yours as well. A lot of this games and the ideas and suggestions everyone's been posting on the ideas channel has really influenced development of the game. Most of the people on this Discord and in the wider community have actually the great minds. They speak numbers, and it's really helped. It's a second opinion on most things, where we would think about one thing and then a community member will come across and go, "That's cool, but have you thought about this?" And we haven't. And I think it's great that not only is this our game, it's your game as well. I mean, you'll be playing it, and it's great to have your input. It's
Right,
amazing.
it's like we're building this world together, right?
We are.
And yeah, I can't wait to look forward to this sort of world that we all create together. Naturally, having said that, there are a few things that the development team, and this is kind of where the I suppose perspective is different in terms of a game development and how much a community can influence it. There are things that we only see as a development team because we have access to sort of all the information and all the data, and all the progress that's been made. If you think about how perhaps maybe there's a hiccup in our arts department and people are really wanting sort of more models and greater graphics and all these things, then we can start saying, okay, well, this is where the community wants us to focus on. This is where our hiccups are, and we sort of reevaluate and adjust then. So while we are building the game together, it is sort of on the community suggestive basis, right? It's we build this world together, but it's ultimately the people who obviously will eventually be paid to work on this game and everything like that. They're humans too, right? We can't do everything. It's impossible to make everybody happy, but ultimately that's what we're going to strive to be doing. I think it's maybe time to move on to the questions, I would say. Jack, what do you think?
I think so too. We're coming up to 1:15. Well, depends where you are in the world, but it's currently Monday, 15 minutes past midnight for us, except from MK. I hope you understand that the letters next to our names is our approximate location. So we try to be adjusting to everybody, but yeah, we wish we could have done this a bit earlier for some members, but unfortunately, we're not all in the same time zones. So that's why we've picked now, because it's a good time for everybody.
Yeah, maybe I should start. I was in Portugal last week, and I was in Germany the week before, so maybe I should start updating my tags to everywhere I am. Though I do feel incredibly jet lagged, so I'll end up putting world most likely as my. Or maybe I'll just put voids. I think that could be my tag. But moving on to the questions, we've got our first question from. Apologies if I pronounce any of these wrong. We've got Syndicate, who asks the very stoic, laconic manner, Steam when? Question mark. Jack, if you want to take this one.
We are on Steam already. We've got a page on Steam. The Steam page is currently in the process of being reworked to make to add more detail to our existing selection of detail. Want to add some more videos, hopefully some trailers and pictures on there soon. But we are on Steam. If your question is related to when we're going to release on Steam, we plan to release later on in the year. We don't really want to release on Steam yet. We want to go onto our website and release on our website as early access alpha. And then once the alpha has been and gone, we can then release on Steam. This is
it's most likely.
This is mainly due to a Steam's flawed design in the reviewing process, where you can actually review a game in early access, meaning that if the game isn't up to your par, because obviously it's early access, it's not released yet, you can give it a negative review. And then when the game does release, that review, unfortunately, doesn't get removed. It stays with the game. So
Yeah, and
during
ultimately
development,
there's not a lot of discussion as well for a lot of sort of early access games, and I'm sure we've all experienced them, is where they end up being an early access hell. And there's quite a few reasons for that. One of them is, as Jack was talking about, in terms of reviews and in terms of developments, it becomes then very unlikely that they would ever want to move to full release because they'd be bringing all this baggage with them. And it's not as if, hey, we've cleaned up everything, here you go, here's an initial experience. It's almost as if, here's an early access. People build up their perceptions. People, don't really realize, right, it's early access. And even though it does say so on the Steam page and all that, when you're playing the game, you do sometimes get disappointed or frustrated and whatnot. And then it's very unlikely that you'll come to that game later on. So definitely in terms of what we have as our sort of planned releases, Steam is one of them. We also obviously plan to release on Nintendo Switch and for VR. Whether early access and all that is going to be available on different platforms, I think one thing that we can most likely commit to is, the community here on our Discord and the early backers. And for our YouTube audience, the link will be in the description. But these are the most likely the people we'll be having as our early access testers. So yeah, that's sort of the long-winded answer to a very laconic and short question. And just to remind everybody on the Discord, the question time channels to ask questions is still open. And if we get time, then obviously we'll come to your question if it's added later on. We're going to miss that question from Coat Eater just because of explicit language, but we move on to Nemse, who asks, game available for Brazil when? And I think you're more familiar with with this answer, Jack. So I'll also give you this to you.
So unfortunately, after many days of research, I believe a certain game and from a certain studio who depicted Brazil in a negative light caused the Brazilian government to enforce ESBR ratings on all games that are made outside of Brazil. So the only way we can get a rating to be sold in Brazil or to be available in Brazil is to have that ESBR rating, which is not, it's not difficult to get, but it is very difficult to get if you're still in development. They don't
Right.
rate
It's
games that are still in development. So once the
something
game has
that
been
we'd want to
released,
do.
once the game is released, we'll get that ESBR rating, and that should make it easy access for Brazil. But it seems, judging from a lot of research, it seems that only Brazil does this.
And it's one of the things that we, as we move further in development and we begin, we sort of been very casually speaking to a few publishers now. Sort of, I've just been hitting up my old network links and things like that. And these are the sort of things that traditionally would be handled by a publisher, right, in terms of distribution. So definitely it's something to be decided, but I cannot imagine this is the parallel universe in which we do release to Brazil. So moving on to the next question from Furan. Fishing when? And it's quite a cool question, and it's definitely something that one of the mechanics I think we'd want to implement, right, Jack?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
fishing is I think it's a good idea to have fishing. Whether or not you'll be able to fish from the air, maybe the clouds. I don't know if
I
anyone
think
has
it's
ever
an
seen.
interesting concept, right? Like, how do you achieve fishing in an archipelago of the skies, and whether there's, perhaps those picturesque lakes with the waterfalls that seemingly flow into, the ground thousands of miles down below, or something like that. Then definitely as a game designer, that's an interesting concept, and I think it'll be very cool to implement down the road. In terms of priorities, obviously it's not the top of our list, and I don't think anybody can would fault us for saying that.
I have seen instances of frogs being, baby frogs, unfortunately, being rained upon. They're light enough to be taken up there. I've seen it. It has rained frogs once where I am. So maybe, possibly,
maybe. Moving on to what I believe is Japan Render, JPNRENDR, asks, has Zavinet ever considered having a booth at an event such as Insomnia Gaming Festival? There's an entire indie system, if I remember. And I think the short answer to that is yes. The longer answer to that is yes, but not right now. It's something that we will probably be looking at perhaps even as close as next month, as we see the sort of changes that we've made to our workflows and our processes come to fruition. It's something that we definitely want. We definitely want to we would definitely want to get our name out there as an upcoming indie studio, and sort of leveraging the industry contacts and seeing, hey, okay, if we do a booth, what kind of exposure can we get from this? What kind of benefit can we do with this? And as we are right now as a studio, we have a certain amount of time, right? So if you say in a week, somebody already has maybe 7 hours to work on this, right? For perhaps one of the modelers, say, for instance, then that's 7 hours that we would rather be spending making the models that are going to go in the game. So it's a question of like, is this a good use of our time? And would the community benefit from this? Because ultimately, our aim is to make something that the community wants and the community enjoys playing. And all of our decisions as a studio is not as so much financially motivated as you would find in, perhaps maybe larger studios or whatnot. It's more about, does this benefit the people involved? So when it comes to questions like this, in terms of exposure, in terms of game festivals, whatever, it would be nice. Would it be practical? Would it be useful? And that's something that we will have to decide at the time and whatever the event is, etc.
I mean, much likely things like that we can put our leaflets at events. You could even put a poster up at a non-gaming event. There's no limitations on just being at game events. You can do it. You could do it at a Comic-Con. You could do it at a computer festival. A technology fair. You could put your poster up, and we could advertise there. There's no real limitation on that.
Yeah, no, it's definitely in terms of having, a sort of a very like well-designed booth, and people would come and there'd be sort of merchandise, etc. That's something that we would consider. But in terms of sort of advertising at general events and things like that, then yeah, that's definitely something that we would like to do, regardless of the situation. So for the next question, we have Zesty Nesquik, who asks a very good question: what would you say is your top priority as a development team at the moment? So Jack, I think you'd probably
Top
like to answer.
priority, yeah, easy one. Top priority is currently it's getting updates out often. Getting the updates out to you, get the updates actually playable, bug free, fixing bugs. And what we've been currently doing is releasing a point 0.xx. So the next one will be 0.16. We have a bunch of functions in there, features, and then we have a bug testing week or 2 weeks, depending on how big the update was. And currently, the life cycle that is that we do our bug testing, bug research, bug reports, and fix as many bugs as we can for that 0.16, and then we close it off about a week later, and then move on to 17. So our top priority, really, as a development team at the moment, is getting updates out to you, because again, we don't like, especially at this point in time, we don't really like having an update out in January and then not updating the game for 6 months and then release another bit of update, and then suddenly people get bored about waiting. So we want to release as many updates as we can, but we also want to give people a lot of content in those updates as well, not just we fixed how grapple physics work.
Yeah, it's sort of balancing, providing meaningful updates and making sure they're consistent and regular and people can see progress, especially to the backers on Patreon, which is also going to be linked on the in the description. And the idea is sort of, I guess this is a unique challenge that is being grappled by Xavinet, is, as I said beforehand, where a game at this stage of the development usually wouldn't even be talked about amongst the whole studio, right? It would be a sort of a core development team. They would be working at the concept. They'd be building the MVP, while the rest of the studio would be working on perhaps the other franchises, etc. And it would never really leave the boardroom. So definitely in terms of making sure that the updates are regular, making sure they're meaningful, making sure that they're updates that people want to see. But ultimately, they're also, all these updates are moving towards what is our MVP, which stands for minimum viable product. So sort of ticking off these lists and going back to the earlier question in terms of fishing, that's sort of something that would be a stretch goal of an MVP. It wouldn't be a core component. So there are some updates that are going to come first, and then some updates that are going to be much later in the future. So
On
we
that
hope that
basis,
you.
on that basis, we're going to leave the question time up after the Q&A is over. If what I'll say, Wolf, to that stretch goal is that if every single person in this Discord currently upvotes Furin's question, I'd definitely consider putting it in for the MVP. But you're going to need at least 5,000 upvotes. So,
Well, in our Discord community, we've got, I think, close to 5,000, but not just 5,000 just yet. Definitely, as time changes on, I think we can sort of bring in more of these suggestions and have kind of some system in place where people who really desperately want to see something, there's a way for that to be heard, and that's definitely something that, as we are a community oriented studio, that's a system that we'd definitely like to have in place. So, sort of moving on, Hectorus, on a more serious note, referring to his earlier question of T or A, how would you rank cookie types?
cookie types.
Cookie types. Is he referring to sort of milk chocolate? Is that the sort of thing? Well, I'm a classic guy, so sort of normal chocolate chip all the way. If you bite into it and it's got raisins, then somebody's done something wrong, and you have a lot of bad karma that you need to cleanse.
It seems we're on the opposite end of the spectrum because I like fruit cookies with raisins and chocolate.
Well, I guess this Q&A has now turned into the end of Zarvinet Studios. Thank you all. No, I'm joking. But
I suppose
yeah.
on that basis, then I suppose you're not for pineapple on pizza.
No, I dislike pineapple on pizza. Though I have never tried it, and I do believe you should never knock something until you try it. But I'm gonna have to get through that initial fear barrier.
We may have started a new war of people with pineapple on pizza.
Yeah,
oh well.
This marks the beginning of the end. The beginning. Moving on from moving back to Tyrannus, the Diamond Gear asks, will we be able to put images on the sides of our ships, like logos or clan symbols?
Yes.
Yes.
We were going to have the abilities for people to name their ships in Blueprint, and then have an option where they can tick, which will place the name of their ship on the ship. Logos, we'd like an in-game logo designer where people can logo design. We'd have to improve upon our way of reporting, because giving the community, if you give the community the freedom to basically create any logo they want using like layers, I think if we had to initially start off with the ability to pick a symbol, I think that will be working. But if we did something like Call of Duty allows, where you can have multiple layers, we'd have to improve upon our reporting system, because while there'll be some really cool logos, there'll also be a lot of offensive. So having the report system in place so people can report other people for offending images would be of importance first, before we allow the community to go wild. Because again, I wouldn't want to upset some people over some choice names of ships. Although
Yeah, no, it's definitely something
we'll probably have
have to
some
be
sort
wary
of
of.
filtering system to stop people from naming their ships very offensive names. Because I can guarantee there is some people that will name their ships because there's no filter. So
Yeah, no, 100%. It's something that, any sort of online component of a game is always going to grapple with. You'll always find somebody who's a bit bored or wants a couple of cheap laughs.
Elite
We've all been there,
Dangerous,
so it's not.
one of my
It's not
favorite games,
something.
Elite Dangerous, did it a couple of years ago. A few of my friends had offensive name ships, and it's only up until recently they've put a filter on.
Yeah, it's definitely
And
It's definitely a component that we'll have to
some
consider.
of my friends' ships are called F asterisk 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 asterisk. So I wouldn't, yeah, something important to us.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's if you look at the state of GTA Online right now, it's definitely something that is sort
Yeah.
of you know been raised to more of a prioritization in a lot of game designers' minds. Moving on from that, Mr. J943, shortened to Joe, asks, any new key announcements, or how could I get a key? Any way I could purchase it, or will have to wait for an early access Steam release? So key announcements will come about, and we're going to do them in a more of a irregular basis. Definitely something that I personally have been considering is having key announcements for people who are going to, especially artists, creators, content creators of that kind, having some kind of draw where if you're you're able to make a fantastic artwork and get it featured on the Discord and elsewhere and on our social media channels, then that sort of keys can be tied to that. Maybe that's something more towards down the line as the game builds up, and as less people are able to access the keys simply through Patreon, which is sort of answers the next question. Is that keys right now are available on Patreon, and there are sort of multiple tiers, very affordable tiers as well, I'd say, where you're able to access a key. And for the YouTube audience, the link is going to be in the description for that Patreon.
That on top of that, the big question on that is that no, you don't need to keep recurring your payment. You only need to pay once, and then you can cancel once you've paid, you can cancel after that, or you can downgrade to, if you want to keep supporting, you can downgrade to the least amount of money, which is, I think it's set for like a dollar, or is it something really low? If you want to keep supporting development, but you don't want to have to commit to the minimum, I think is about $12-15, I think the minimum is per month. You don't need to do that. You could do if you really wanted to, you could buy one tier with the key in the title, and then you can cancel and never pay again. And you still, how that works is once you have the supporter role, you have the supporter role. It doesn't go away. The key doesn't get revoked either. It's once a supporter, always a supporter.
Right, and that's something as well that is, everybody who's supporting us through these pre-alpha stages and this very early development stages, that's something that we want to pay close attention to. We don't want to step on any toes as we prepare for release and all these things. So definitely, people who support us now will find themselves supported. But the option of supporting us through these channels are not going to always be open. So somebody who has come later on in the game, he might not find that he can buy a perpetual key for $12 or so and then downgrade. It might be that for people who join in later on, they might have to continue being sort of regular supporters, or as as it begins to early access, there will be other means of supporting and receiving the content in that regard.
On top of that, I will also just quickly add, all current supporters, old and new, are currently in the credits for the game, and every update we update the credits. So if you have supported the game through any funding method, you are permanently encapsulated in the game forever as part of an early access backer. As a thank you for basically getting us off the ground, I should say.
Yeah, exactly. It's we're a completely self-funded studio, and sort of having the support has been really invaluable, and we definitely from the dev team and from myself would like to appreciate everybody who's supported us for however long. All of it does really help, and naturally a lot of the gear and software that we use is catered towards people with much higher budgets, much larger funding behind them. So I definitely like to thank you from the bottom of our hearts for that. And yeah, so for the last question, part of that question, will you have to wait for early access Steam release? No. Easy one. Top Code asks, when will Jack be less busy? Well, to answer that question, if you wanna answer that, Jack, I think you've been more busy, I'd say.
I'm currently on leave at the moment. I'm having a break. I have them every year. for a couple of days. And I am currently just chilling at the moment. I'm due to get back on project probably on Tuesday. Enjoying Easter with the family. But usually because I am coding, I am model making, I am texture making, texture adding, prefab creating, testing, researching, and keeping active on the Discord, posting on the forums,
Man
keeping
of
active,
many talents.
doing the business as well, the parts of the company that no one likes to do, such as accounts, um, filing accounts, looking after company's house, looking
A
after
lot of
financial
people,
data. There's a long list of things.
underestimate how much work goes into it.
So there's a lot of thing, and also a lot of the back end stuff the community doesn't need to see. It's very difficult to say when I'll be less busy, um, because I'm always busy. I don't really have time off. I'm working on this full time now. This is my full time job, and more active. More active where? Here on Discord? I'd like to be around everywhere. If I can clone myself, I would. But unfortunately, if I clone myself, I would probably be just as busy as a clone. So I don't think that would work.
Be two busy clones just hacking away at the
Cloning myself,
millions of things that need to be done. I think a lot of
cloning
people
myself.
underestimate what goes into not just game development, but add game development with almost one of the more sort of moonshot things that people can do, which is having a startup, and not just having any startup, but having a game dev startup. Um,
It's
is there's
difficult.
a reason why you have the big actors right now, the larger studios, and they become more entrenched, and you think, why is there are not a lot of people making AAA titles or whatever as there were maybe say 20 years ago. Is because not only has the software become a lot more complicated, and you start to have teams of like not just 10 but 100 people working on things. And sort of looking back at my own experience, a lot of my work was not just things that we were creating in house, but we would also be contracted by EA, larger companies, to do very specific parts for a much larger project. And it becomes almost becomes akin to how the defense industry works, actually, where you have, say, for instance, a large ship, and then one part of the hull gets designed by one team in Wisconsin, and another part gets designed by another team in tri-state, and etc., etc., etc. So we're really David in this David and Goliath sort of battle. But yeah, there's a lot of work that goes into it. So whenever we inevitably do mess up, and that's one thing that we want to be clear on, is that for a lot of us, a lot of us have industry experience. Some of us have a lot of hobbyist experience, and as we meld things together, there will be hiccups along the way. But we hope that you do continue to be patient with us, and understand that we will always be open to negative criticism, and constructive criticism is ultimately what we strive for. And know that that's going to be one of the core values at our studio, is taking
Yeah.
on that constructive criticism.
I mean,
And
I'd have
really
to, in order for me to be more active here, I'd have to clone myself at least 14 times. I
yeah,
say
if
14
that
times. There's 13 versions of me being busy, and there's one clone of me sleeping all the time.
sort of
I
sharing
feel
the
like I'm
rest
sleeping.
between the other clones.
Yeah,
That'd be science getting in on that. How do I
taking it turns. Don't
need
really
to start
sleep,
inventing
unfortunately.
stuff like that. Elon
Right.
Musk, where you're at, we need to start sharing sleep between people. That's how it should
I
be.
don't know when the last time I had a good night's sleep.
Yeah, it's tough.
It's difficult to sleep and work at the same time.
Summer Plays Live asks, on what devices will the game be available? So the as we said earlier, the website is going to be our main platform, but that won't be the only platform. For the full release, we're definitely looking at mainly Steam, and VR platforms, as this game is being designed from the ground up to be VR friendly. And we're also in the discussion terms of a Nintendo Switch platform. So getting the game on the Switch and how Unity is very, very easily incorporated into the Switch platform. I think it's definitely something worth looking at. And sort of when you look at the style of the game and sort of the ease and portability of having a Switch, it's something that we would definitely like to get into the hands of as many players as possible. Whether there'll be more platforms later on, and that's sort of including like Epic and all these other platforms. It's
I
something
will
that
add
is
to that.
to be yet decided.
We'll add to that is we also would like to get day one Steam Deck support. I know the Steam Deck is currently out, but it's not actually out for a lot of the world. I'm still on a pre-order that's probably not going to be available till September. So I at this moment in time, especially with the docks not being out yet, I'm going to call the Steam Deck. Well, Steam wouldn't call it early access, but the fact that the whole world is still waiting for their pre-orders, I would call it still in development. So once Steam Deck is available worldwide and everyone can just click and buy and get it, I'd like to make sure that our game is Steam Deck friendly.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's as we have a development pipeline, things will change. The industry is so fast moving that it could be that another platform comes out, something like that, and sort of takes precedence in a way. It's definitely something that we'll always be paying close attention to and always keeping up with whatever the market and the community decides. Is sort of like the platforms in demand, and ultimately it's not so much about the platforms, it's about getting the game in the hands of the players and allowing as many people to experience this world as possible.
Before we move to our next question, Hollow has just joined. Hollow, you there?
Read my mind.
Hello, everybody.
Will you introduce yourself to the 48 people listening, including YouTube?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Hollow. I'm one of the lead 3D modelers and 3D art designers with Adrift. I am the one in charge of making the models that Jack then textures, and I've been trying to get on the texture team, but have unfortunately been lost in the woods with it recently because I am still learning how to do texturing. But I am the lead in charge of 3D modeling, so any 3D modeling questions you can always throw back at me.
Yep, that's Hollow's been sort of a bit of a wizard, delegating a lot of the modeling tasks and whatnot to his team. He's definitely one of the greatest assets Zarvinet has, and as I've been focusing a lot on the studio sort of development side of things and improving these workflows, we haven't had a lot of time to work with each other, Hollow. I don't think, but I'm looking forward to that changing in the coming weeks and being able to really grapple that down.
He's also very good at telling me off when I go directly to the other modelers and don't delegate tasks to him first.
Yes, because I'm supposed to be the lead 3D modeler, and if you're going to assign a model, you should assign it to the lead 3D modeler.
Yeah, and that's to our community. That's like sort of the one of the things that, as I said, are hiccups and all these things where you move from something that's very hobbyist, very passionate to professional studio. They're inevitably going to things that don't meld well, or people not knowing what to do, and having these pipelines and processes in place is what really speeds up development.
It was more of like a lighthearted jab than anything else. I know I can trust Jack with many of the tasks that he delegates as well, because seeing as he's on the coding side, if he has something that he needs modeled right then and there and I'm not available, he can easily take it to one of my coworkers and work it from there. So I trust Jack with that. I just tell him to come to me because I like ribbing him.
Oh yeah, yes. We don't want to be. We don't want to be. We don't want to. We never want to take ourselves too seriously as a studio. You see, I think when you take yourselves too seriously, then you begin to become a EA. We'll most likely have to cut that out of the YouTube. Anyways, so the next question is, unless there was something else you wanted to add on to that, Jack.
Yeah. So let's have a quick scroll up. Every time I come off that channel, it scrolls straight to the bottom of the question. I say, yeah, scroll back up again. Key feature concepts you're proud of and excited to implement. The next one, the next key feature for 16 is realistic ship flight. which is I have been testing a lot of, and yeah, the new flight mechanics are incredible. They are based upon how many wings you have, how many engines, the thrust, the weight, everything. If you make a plane and you don't have any wings, you're not able to turn because you don't have the ability. Also, you fall like a brick because you've got no key features of what makes it a plane. If you make a plane and you don't put a tail and you don't put wings on it, have you made a plane or have you made a flying brick? But yeah, the key feature, the next concept is obviously, as I say, it's going to be flight mechanics. I'm sure everyone here will enjoy better flight mechanics over the current set, which is just basically floating at this point, I should say. Floating with up, down, side to side movement. But the new mechanics allow you to literally point your ship upwards and fly upwards, point your ship down, do a barrel roll.
Yeah,
And
it's definitely having these sort of core components, right? What really, if you distill Voids Adrift into its core components and making sure that they work really well. So sort of these flights, right? Because while there will be a lot of things to do as you walk around and cities and islands to experience, one of the things that's going to be really important is how you jump from island to island, and having these ships fly in a way that's natural and fluid is something that we're really going to take a lot of time, really listen to the community and really sort of nail down. So when you jump into that ship for the first time, on full release, and you start flying, it's it, it's going to feel amazing. And that is a commitment from
yeah,
Zavinet.
and one of the best features is the ability to grapple from your ship while it moves, so that if you accidentally pointed down and you forwarded your throttle and fell off and you managed to grapple, you can fall with your ship knowing you're going to crash. It's nothing more gracious than knowing you're going to crash and being unable to do anything about it. So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely having a proper crash implementation, right? I think will keep egos down a little bit, and I think that's always vitally important.
also jumping on board someone else's ship and dive bombing that one because you can't. Yeah,
Oh yeah,
if you can't
we'll
steal the
see
loot off
lots
it,
of
you
that.
might as well make sure they can't have it either.
Um,
Right,
how
next.
has the team responded to both old and recent criticisms over time, and what message could be given to uplifted people who still have their doubts? Well, I think that's something that is almost can't be answered, right? The idea is that there will always be criticism. As I said before, it's hard to not only develop a game, but also to do a startup and then do a game dev startup. All these sort of compounding factors are something that's always going to, affect the skepticism and perspective of people. But largely, a lot of, I think, the criticism is something that you find with a lot of hobbyist projects. And I think as we redevelop our studio from the ground up and really take on a more of a professional sort of perspective to development, then a lot of those criticisms will then just turn into other criticisms, right? There's nobody's above criticism, and we definitely don't think we are. We would just hope from our community, especially on the Discord, that it's constructive. We don't know everything, but we sure would like to leverage our community to help us get to be the best that we can be, and make the world as good as we can make it, and to sort of uplift people's spirits. Largely, I think making sure that when we're hiring people, we're hiring the right people, people who do have industry experience. And one of the things that I've been going through is making sure that the people who are sort of our core members, really helping them to develop their skills and make them not just ready to develop on Voids Adrift and be you know hugely contributing members, but to be actually industry level experts. And that's the sort of altruistic approach that I've taken, and I think it's been working well so far, is not thinking of with these team members, okay, how do we get them to be, great Voids Adrift modelers? So how do we get them to be good modelers and great modelers in their own rights?
It's a discipline that they're learning.
Yeah, they're learning, and giving them the right guidance, and that's sort of what I'm bringing to the table. I think will go a long way, and I think a lot of the criticisms in terms of inexperience will largely fade away as they continue to grow, and as we continue to grow as a studio. Weekend, I presume that's pronounced weekend, asks, will there be any PvP mechanics and/or incentives for PvE/PvP?
Well, I've got this question down. So we've discussed this for several months about the PvP mechanics, because again, with this type of game, balance is needed. There was discussions about splitting the server base up and having a PvE server only and a PvP server, but then you're splitting the player base in two, which sometimes can affect numbers. So we're not doing that. We're not going to have individual servers for different types of gameplay. It's just going to be one big server. The difference being that this safe zone, there's going to be a safe zone, right? Is the zone that every single new player spawns in. And the safe zone is massive. It's a whole region. It's a temperate region. And that region of the sky is several thousand islands big. So people can still enjoy the core gameplay of fighting AI, I suppose. There'd be, ghost ships, I suppose. But the whole idea that players can enjoy PvE, exploration, shipbuilding, they can even roleplay if they really wanted to, without having to be killed by other players. That said, PvP players will enjoy the fact that they can leave the PvE zones in either up or down, up towards the sky, down towards the void. When you leave the safe zone, every zone below that is PvP. So,
and I
if you
think the contrast as well, I think is definitely something worth to note. It's when you're the way that we've been thinking about it and designing it and developing it is that when you do leave that PvE zone to the PvP zone, it's a whole shift, right? No longer, are you sort of meeting other people, and it's, it can be very lighthearted. You can sort of make friends and all that other stuff that I think we really want to knuckle down. And as a social aspect of an MMO, we're also thinking, okay, when you leave that safe zone and PvP, you're going to be wary of everybody around you, right? It's I think one game that does that really well in the past has been, sort of RuneScape, where you go into the wilderness and, there's a whole tone shift, right? And that's something that we're going to, be inspired from and really emphasize and bring to the forefront. You're
now,
going to be on your
on,
toes the whole time.
on top of that, the incentives would be that in PvE, you won't be attacked by anybody. It's sort of a survival. It's more about exploration and adventure, and the PvP is going to be more about survival, still adventure and exploration, but you've got danger hidden around any corner. You don't know if someone's hiding behind an island, and I guess
We
that's,
want you to be sweating.
yeah.
Right.
But we also want to make it so that people think that there needs to be a reason other than, oh yeah, you can be attacked. So the loot quality and the quality of the material, it will be greater out on the PvP zones. That said, you can still get most materials in the temperate safe zone, but for more quality loot, stronger ships, stronger armor, better wood qualities, you're going to have to go into PvP. That
With
said,
great risk comes great reward.
yeah, that said, we will say that it might be a good idea to make friends and groups and alliances in the PvE zones before venturing down to PvP, encouraging group gameplay where you all stay together and you go together and undoubtedly sometimes die together. Although hopefully as a group you won't, because be the point of the group.
Yeah, you wouldn't want party wipeouts. That's something that's sort of dreaded in any MMO. And yeah, so sort of that's definitely one of the things that we're thinking quite heavily about.
On top of that,
You know,
just quickly to add to that, is the one of the best mechanics we've got is the marketplaces, which we've discussed in a previous Q&A. But the marketplaces there'll be a marketplace in every zone. There'll be an island you can go to in a marketplace, and each marketplace will have its own specific materials and its own specific market. So you might find that in the void where there's no trees in that marketplace will be more expensive because there isn't any. So we value people going into PvP zones, collecting resources that are rare and higher quality, and then going back to the temperate zone and selling them for a higher price.
and having these like trade routes and this sort of the inspiration. This is sort of one of the things that I was initially brought on to Zarvinet for, is sort of developing this whole economy, and having a player driven economy. And one of the things that I think is really missing from a lot of MMOs is having trade routes, right? And having sort of how different markets interplay with one another. And if you think about the real world, how sort of you have in one region of the world you have something that's where you find the natural resources. In a different world you have different natural resources, and how price differences and whatnot occur there. That's something that we really want to really sort of get into and get our hands dirty with, to bring this world to life. But obviously with everything, there are a lot of changes to be made, and there's going to be updates where we test out sort of things, these sort of things, and see how things shift. So naturally, a lot of this we can't really talk too much about now, but yeah, exciting things to come in that sense, and that's definitely something that's been sort of the biggest, one of the biggest interests of my own as I come into this sort of debut as a lead game designer, is how can I create something that's unique and innovative, but better because of it. We'll move on to the next question. Sky Captain Nobody. Is the shipbuilding going to be a lot easier in the future than it is now? Not everyone is talented enough to use the editor to make something look good, and it also looks like it takes time to even try to make a craft. This is a real sort of big concern of ours. This is something that we're investing a lot of time into, and something that we really want to knuckle down, is the shipbuilding mechanics, because not only are we really concentrated on ship flights and all that sort of stuff and making sure that it's natural and fluid, we also want to apply those same principles to the shipbuilding, and we want it to be as intuitive as possible.
So there will be mirror modes. Mirror mode is something being worked on, so you can make ships easier and faster, and there are a lot more easier tools to create. In the later versions of the game, you'll be able to, rather than being stuck with a starter cube, there'll be a selection of pre-built templates you can just click on and modify. So there'll be several ships of different sizes. You can just click on an example and then you can modify it. It gives players who don't want to spend hours making a really cool design a quick start to a ship. They click a design, modify it, make it bigger, make it smaller, add parts to it, then save it, and then makes it a lot easier. But on top of that, we want to keep the advancement that it is currently at. We also would like to advance on that and make it harder as well, make it more advanced. So we want an easy mode and a really advanced mode, because there is some talented shipbuilders, as we've seen in the Steam Workshop, which we can bring onto that as well. If you're not very good at designing, you can always download someone else's ship and modify it. So that's one of those advantages to shipbuilding at the moment.
In terms of talking sort of little side note in terms of the really talented shipbuilders in the audience and YouTube Discord, is that we'll be soon announcing for the tutorial for somebody to help design the tutorial ship. So this will be the first ship that people, as they learn to get around the mechanics of the game, this will be the ship that they collect resources for, and they build for their first ship. So it's quite a momentous thing to have under your belt and be able to point at and say, yeah, I designed the blueprint for every tutorial ship. And yeah, so obviously more details await on that, but that's definitely something to stay tuned about in the future. Haplo asks, I thought I sorted it months ago, but my role is only Nomad, but I've already spent a few months as a Kickstarter. Just curious if I should have a different role. Thank you.
I've sorted that out. I
Yep.
do message people on Patreon often, asking them if they're missing anything. And this month I only got 2 replies, so it's difficult to keep on top of that if no one replies.
It's definitely
Um,
something that it's a process that we've had at the back of our minds now for a while, and it's something that we definitely want to develop to make sure that it's as seamless as possible, right? So that there doesn't need to be any intervention from the dev team or from Jack in terms of handing out keys or anything like that.
we are,
It's something
yeah,
that we want to have,
we are
you go
moving.
onto the website or the
Yeah,
Patreon and
I'm going to suggest it. We are going to move over to the website soon, where your accounts will be intertwined. So your
yeah,
your in-game account will be tied to your website account, and you can change a lot of data on there, especially when you're purchasing a pre-alpha copy of the game or a release key. You can get access, and everything's going to be sorted out automatically.
yeah. It's yeah. It's this is sort of the one of the many issues tackling, as you build up a studio, right? It's how do you get all these processes that's not exactly game dev, but you still need. Um, Sand asks, will there be any survival mechanics such as food? Now that's an interesting one, Sand. I I can't name a lot of games where sort of hardcore survival mechanics work as a sort of and it's not designed as a core component of the game, right? It's not a hardcore survivalist game, but it has survival mechanics such as food. And I find for a lot of the times in my experience in talking with these designers who've actually designed these mechanics, they themselves realize that it ends up being quite distracting and frustrating. Now, that is not to say that we won't have survival mechanics, and it's definitely something that we would implement in the future. We could implement in the future, sorry. But it's something that if we were to implement it, we would definitely like a lot of community feedback on, because there's no reason for us to make the player frustrated in any regard, and whether it adds to the player experience. So if we do it, we would do it well, or just not do it at all. And
Yeah.
I think yeah, that's
While
sort of where
while
we stand on that kind of stuff.
and I'll add to that is that food will recover health. You can obviously you can fish for fish and cook fish, and you can find other items of food and eat them. They will only at this point in time recover stamina or recover health. But as far as
Like a hunger meter
hunger
of some
meter
kind.
that will run down, it's not really. It's not currently what we'd like at the moment. It works in some games. It doesn't work in others.
Yeah, it's if we were to do it, we would have to do it very well.
It might,
Yeah,
if we were to do it, I'm not saying we will do it, but if we were to do it, it would probably be something you would have to create a separate character for under like a hardcore mode, and you still get to play with other players in the same server, but only you'll be affected by it. So it's
perhaps. Yeah.
something that
The-
you've chosen to do this, and there'd be an incentive for it, maybe higher health or higher stamina, because you've chosen to have hunger. But it wouldn't be something we would implement across the whole of the game because, again, sometimes some people might want it, some people don't, and you can deter an audience from making a game survival.
Yeah, it's something that I think maybe we'll take one of these days. Just take an afternoon, a whiteboard, and a couple of whiteboard markers, and really sit down and brainstorm and say, "Hey, would this add to the player experience, or would it deter from it? And is there a way we can add it for some and not for others?" And all these kind of concepts. Again, we would have to explore at a later point in the future, but
On the
not
whiteboard,
really a huge priority for us at the moment.
yeah, on the whiteboard it will just say survival mechanics, yes, no, and we just have to spend hours going. Just keep circling in the no button until we run out of marker ink.
A lot of walls will be headbutted, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Japan Render, again, apologies if I'm not saying that name correctly, will ask, will Voids be on Steam, Epic, or just Steam? So as answered earlier, sort of quick one here, Steam is definitely what we're looking at in terms of commercial release. that's kind of after our website release and having our own platform. Steam is kind of the one that we're focusing on. Epic, again, it may be subject to change in the future. We're not really looking towards Epic at the moment. If there's a demand from it from the community, then again, we would definitely listen. So yeah, that's sort of a TBD, to be decided. Leo asks, will there be some other type of vehicles or gadgets beside grappling hook to help during exploration, such as, say, paragliders or jetpacks, or even that hovering skateboard thing from Treasure Planet?
Yeah.
Yes, I would say so.
I was actually in the process of answering this one. I was going to go answer it, but then I was going to wait till we rolled around to it. We did have discussions of alternative ways to travel, though we are prioritizing the main grapple mechanic first and foremost.
But we are going to have paragliders and jetpacks. We also looked at the idea of like hover boots as well, or something like that in the future.
I pitched gravity boots until I learned that they were also a part of World's Adrift.
Yeah, gravity boots are okay for like. I think the term we're looking for is more magnetic boots.
Yeah,
Well,
you know what I mean.
It's a lot of it. A lot of it is, the grappling hook is something that we really want to implement because it's a huge draw of the game, and we want to really focus on that and do it well. And then comes alternative means of transportation, such as paragliders or jetpacks.
I think one of our Wiz made a model of a sort of like a ballistic cannon, so to speak. It shoots grappling hooks from it, so you can put this on your ship, and you can shoot an island and do like bootleg turns and stuff. So that's a mechanic we're looking at. It's a grappling hook for your ship, like a fireable anchor, so to speak. Yeah, you could hook onto another ship if you really wanted to. And that's how you could capture a ship, I suppose. But that's something we're also working on as well. And then other mechanics. I mean, you could build planes. You don't need cores to build a plane. You can just build a plane, as long as you've got an engine, wings, and a tail, and the ability to move. Then yeah, sure, that's a vehicle. The thing with the ship editor is that when you say other vehicles, I mean, given the tools we give you, such as cores, engines, the pilot seat, there's no limitation on what the player can build. I mean, I've seen some crazy stupid stuff on the workshop. Some of the things actually labeled "do not fly" because it doesn't work. But there's a lot of cool things as well. So yeah, the possibility for producing strange looking ships as well as hover. I mean, if you slap an engine and a core on a flat surface, have you made a hoverboard? I think you have.
Ooh, getting all philosophy here. What's the ship called? Is it?
Just make a giant spoon.
Yeah.
There is no spoon.
Yeah. Spoon
Um,
philosophy.
Yeah.
Brandon asks, Dev team, how do you feel about the release of Unreal Engine 5 and will it at all affect game development? Unreal Engine 5 is pretty cool. I'm using it for one of my clients now in sort of a side project. They're nothing to do with game development. It's in live action animation. It's cool, but as we're developing this game in Unity, and Unity works really well for us, not just in terms of ease of access, but also licensing and a multitude of other factors, Unreal Engine 5 doesn't really have a huge effect on us. And I think one thing to note from a game industry perspective, Unreal is really catered towards super big development teams. To achieve something that's possible and acceptable, you need a lot of work in Unreal Engine, and there's not a lot of accessibility in that regard. So while it doesn't affect our development anyway, we think it's very cool, and we're excited what people make with it. I think it's as a studio, we're not just interested in Voids Adrift and developing Voids Adrift, but we're a part of this ecosystem now, and we're excited to see where the industry goes and what kind of trends come up and come down. And so, yeah, but for us, not a huge amount of difference. Mr. Lowell asks, what difficulties did you all face beginning this journey? I believe this game will be the start of your company, taking a great game and working to reintroduce it to an appreciative audience. Do you risk the same financial hardships, or have you made a better game plan in that regards? That's a really good question. So I think from my experience, the sort of the main hardship has obviously been changing something that's hobbyist and passionate in nature to passionate professionalism, and the hiccups that come about associated with that. You get people from varying levels of experience, varying different backgrounds, that sort of thing, and getting them to all work together and getting something that's sort of uniform in style and in quality and all these things. Um, so that's kind of, I guess, the biggest difficulty I've faced. I'm sure Jack, if you wanna sort of give
Um,
a word on that.
this is the start of the company. We've got many plans for the titles. As you've seen in this Discord, we've got another game, Low Masts, which we that's technically our in development, out of development, test bench game, which a lot of our functions and features will be shared in that game, but that's the sort of game, that's the area that the developers just, test things before implementing. We don't want to implement functions and features to the community in voids, then find that they're wasteful. So we put them in that game, and that's sort of, that's what we're working on at the moment. But the
Yeah,
risk,
Kojima Productions has done the same thing
risking,
with Metal Gear.
risking financial hardships. Well, I've invested a lot of my income from my main job into the project because I've got this mentality of I don't really want to take on investors at this point in time. I don't want to kickstart the game as well. I'm not really interested in that sort of background funding. Like you put a game on Kickstarter or Indiegogo when you can raise like $50,000-$60,000 in a few hours. I don't like the idea of doing that just yet without having an MVP. I believe it's very important to the development of this game and the community that the things we have promised for an MVP are actually in the MVP. So having core mechanics, the ship crafting, the ship flying, island to island hopper, basic cooperative multiplayer, as well as park crafting, the zones, weather, stuff like that. I think it's very important to have those core functions coded, have an MVP, working in a basic form before we go to a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo or get funding or an investor or a publisher, because then we can go to these people and say, hey, listen, we've got this MVP, and it's basically the scaffolding and the core mechanics of what our game wants to be. And they can look at it and play it and go, yep, this is great, and go from there. I think it's trust as well. The community wants to trust the game, and I think having everything we promise in the MVP, get that out there, will basically seal the fate of the company and seal the game as well, making sure that
Yeah,
we're on track.
it's
So
interesting that we've sort of taken on the development of, actually, if you think of a company, say for instance Hello Games, a lot of these new studios that have come about and are not really indie anymore, we've actually followed the same sort of pathway as a lot of them, because they'll be working on something hobbyist in nature, perhaps friends in industry. I know one of the common examples is people that you have coffee with in an industrial park, right? You'll have game studios working sort of all situated around a science park or a business park. And you'll have people who maybe have coffee and lunch together, and sort of they socialize in that aspect, and they'll connect online, and in their free time they'll be, hey, do you want to look at this, do you want to look at this, and it sort of goes on from there. So this has been it's an interesting journey that we're on, and if anything is sort of takes a precedent, then yeah, I think it's probably been the right way to do things. With Kickstarter, you can maybe not achieve your promises and whatnot for a multitude of reasons, and etc. So I'm happy with the way things are now. in terms of the sort of far out future commercial release and things like that, that's all obviously yet to be decided. You know, there are pros and cons. Having something like a publisher is not inherently evil. It's about maybe perhaps picking the right publisher, and sort of evaluating at the time and things like that. A lot of that is kind of it's asking, hey, what are you going to eat in a year's time, right? You're not too sure. You're not too sure. The next question is, when building parts of your ship, will it use the same or similar system of using different types of metal or wood to have different effects on the part's functionality? Like, if something was made of lead, would it be heavy and somewhat weak?
Yeah.
Yes, I think, you know, that's something that we definitely want to implement, is how do people use not only like different parts of their ship to achieve different flight controls and, you know, how the ship flies, etc., but also weight distribution, hull integrity, things like that. It's something that we definitely want
Yeah.
to explore because it could be so interesting
So one of the
from a player
core
experience.
functions for that is that when you've built your ship, when you take your ship out of the shipyard, and place it in the game, the way it will work is you would effectively have just built a frame, and you'll have to obviously put the panels on. Now you can craft the panels and where you want them in the editor, but when you come to build your ship, like you've loaded your ship into the editor and you say, you've picked that frame you designed. At the point of building, you can then select, you know, which materials you want to use. And it will tell you on the actual, we've got the UI coded for this, where it will tell you that, hey, you're building a ship out of lightweight materials. So therefore, it will give you some rough stats of your ship, such as the max speed it could go, possibly how many engines it can have, including its, you know, integrity, how strong it will be, and how heavy it is. So if you do use super heavy materials, it will tell you your ship's going to be this heavy. Now we've got the system idea that the cores you place on your ship are dependent on your weight limit. So if you put 2 cores on your ship, you've got double the weight limit. So therefore, you could build a really heavy ship, but still you'd need 2 cores to make it float, basically, because 1 core just isn't enough to keep it afloat.
And that's like a very rudimentary, you know, of the eventual, you know, you might have certain materials in some place in your ship, and you might have sort of different materials in another place simply based on weight distribution, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's something that,
Like your internal floors, you could probably make out of really soft wood. You're not really interested in strength, but then your outside armor, you want to be able to take a punch. So you'd make them out of really strong lead or titanium, and you'd make them really strong. So you'd have a bit of a choice there on different
you'd
panels.
want to design it to your specifications, and sort of giving you the tools and the means to do so, I think.
And because the way the ship editor works is you can, if you really wanted to, you could make 2 hulls by making a ship outside of the ship, effectively
like
double paneling.
Yeah, like a catamaran.
Yeah,
Definitely, we want to allow as much sort of creativity and see what people come up with.
the issue is that the more structural you make your ship, the heavier it's going to be, because the frame itself has a weight, depending on how you make it and what material you make it out of. If you decide to have more layers and make it really complex, even honeycomb your own ship if you really wanted to, it's going to affect the weight of the frame. And the heavier the ship, the more engines you need, the more engines you need, the more fuel you need, the more fuel you need, the more space, the more space, the more engines you need, the more engines. It's a loop, and it's finding the balance. So you might find that you've built a really, really, really strong tank, but it flies at 1 knot. So it moves like a tank.
But
So
if that's what you'd want to create, and perhaps maybe, you know, within your alliance, that's, you know, the position that you fill, then that's the means to do so. But yeah, from a game design perspective, that's definitely something we want to implement. Hinmir asks, since the building system is so similar to 3D design programs such as Blender, will we be able to port FBX files or similar to use as frameworks to build our ships? That's
No.
something that will have to be
I
very
discussed it,
unlikely.
yeah. But it's
Very
not going to
unlikely.
happen. But we
But
are having the ability to export, so you can
yeah,
save your ships if you wanted to 3D print them. But they won't
yeah.
be there'll be STL files. So you'll be able to basically have a copy of your ship. There are some people here that will spend hours of their life making a really cool design and then going, I've got a 3D print. I'd love to 3D print that. So we're going to give you the option.
Oh,
I
I'm
think
gonna
it's just
be
as a
running my
byproduct.
3D printer. I'll be downloading ships from the Steam Workshop and just 3D printing them all day.
There'll be people designing ships that aren't intended to be ships. That literally models of I don't know, anime characters, or they'll be using the ship editor to produce gadgets like a cup holder or a bottle holder. Not a ship anymore, but the ability to export it to 3D print because
That'll
it's an editor.
that'll be an interesting competition to run later on in development. Design anything but a ship.
Yeah.
I know in the US they do use anything but a bag or like a backpack to carry books with, and you get people bringing in like microwaves and ovens and whatever
There'll be people that
in place in
design.
their backpacks.
There'll be some people making like the house from Up.
Yeah, there's it'll be
I built,
interesting. It'll be very cool. I'm
uh,
excited to see what people come up with.
I built a 6-story apartment. It's not it's not a ship. It's a building. Skies.
Well, yeah, it's one of the more sort of exciting things to see what people come up with in these kind of creations. And if you give somebody, if you teach a man how to fish, right? And it's like, well, I'm going to teach a community how to build ships, or at least give them the tools to do so. Apologies. And yeah, it's like, will they create ships? Will they create teacups? Who knows? But
Hey,
it'll be interesting nonetheless.
if you take a ship from the workshop and you modify it and you turn it into a building, is that technically Extreme Makeover Void's Drift Edition?
Ooh, ooh.
Move that blimp.
Hunter SA asks, how performance heavy is the game expected to be? Well, as we're sort of thinking about development of Switch and thinking about VR, there are going to be some restrictions in terms of load, but what we are definitely sort of in mind is that we want it to be a very intensive game. This is not some AAA
No,
photorealistic
I've
game.
got my background is IT. So the several years I've worked, well, over 10 years now of in IT, I have amassed a considerably large amount of old technology, should I say. Old technology that the community would still call their gaming computer, such as GTX 660s and 750s and
I
really
think
old,
I
really
think I
old
still have a
hardware.
780 in my closet.
Yeah, so we've all got old hardware, so we're able to go ahead and test the different levels of details and quality modes on this old hardware and give out benchmarks for the community so they can sort of work out if they can play the game on different specs, and then give out it will help us develop a way of as some games have it now, where you can click auto detect and it will automatically, based upon the hardware, give you a setting based upon what you have. But that, again, that's going to be some testing on my side, working out if you can play this on a laptop from 2008 versus if you can play it on a, well, I mean, if you struggle to play it on a 3090, then might be a you problem, not us problem.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we want to get, as I said before, sort of we want to get the game in as many hands as possible and making sure that every player gets the best experience of the game that they can get on whatever hardware they have, and making sure that there's no discernible advantage to either player of varying hardware. So yeah,
There
definitely,
is
definitely, it's not going to be intensive. It's not going to be intensive as like, it's not going to be what's that game? Uh, what's that game developed from the CryEngine? Crisis, is it? I don't know.
Crisis. Yeah, can it
Yeah,
run? Can you run
yeah.
Crisis?
That's it's not going to be that. It's not going to be that.
Although we do have a secret game mode that me and GT have got that we might release to the public, and it's 16-bit mode, and it allows you to play the entire game in 16 bits. Does it work? Yes. Is it fun? Kind of. Is it strange? Well, it's 16 bits, so yes, it's very strange. It's very blocky.
Mhm.
Does it run
Well, I
great?
imagine.
Yes, it runs on integrated graphics. I tested on an old Dell Inspiron laptop.
There we
It
go.
works great. Although you can't make out anything other than an island and a tree, or even your grapple, because it's too many. It's not too many bits. It's actually a really fun game mode. Might release it one day if anyone's interested in the 16-bit mode.
The Shadow Sage asks, will the devs announce more Q&A sessions and showcase what the fans have made / contribute to the game? Yeah, that's kind of been one of the things that I've sort of taken accountability for, is understanding that, all right, how is it as a studio we can be sort of more transparent and have some kind of regular outreach to the community and making sure that the community understands what kind of progress has been going on, having Q&A sessions like this. So any questions that might have missed our busy brains, we can sort of leverage the community to help us out with and understand, hey, the community is actually really concerned about this. We need to give an answer for it, etc., etc., etc. So, yep, more Q&A sessions will be planned. The dev blog will be taken ownership by myself and Jack as we sort of put out regular blogs, and the YouTube and the Instagram will also be released here on the Discord, where this Q&A will be uploaded. Obviously, for the YouTube audience, you already know that. So yeah, expect regular updates. Expect to be kept in the know, and expect transparency. And if we ever slip up or anything like that, then do hold us accountable, because that's something that is very core to us as a studio, and something that we see has been a negative trend in the industry as of late, and that's not a trend that we ascribe to.
We missed a question. Rowan asked a question. Rohan asked a question. He said, "How much wood could a woodchuck wood if a woodchuck could chuck wood?" And to answer that question, if Peter Piper picked a pepper peppers, and I picked a pepper peppers, how many picked a peppers did Peter pick?
Yeah,
I've actually also contributed to answer this in the chat. My answer was 2 pounds, and that is the answer I stand by. Any more, and you'd be verging into impossible territory.
Next
Dr. Grass Tyson asks, in early development, the game used low poly textures, but over time, the art style has transitioned towards graphics with higher fidelity. Does this mean that players can expect higher quality textures moving forward?
Yeah.
This is something I think I could answer. Short answer, yes. Long answer, yes. More or less, yes. We are currently putting a priority on low polygon models in order to keep the models simple and kind of basic, so that they can be processed and run by any computer, or more or less either lower end computers or low to mid end computers, because we want to prioritize being able to play the game over having it look like Elden Ring or The Witcher. However, that being said, we have been exploring other texturing options since our early days of the actual models in our early days, and as we have delved more into deeper texturing work and deeper textures as a whole, we have discovered that it is easier to create lower poly models that we can then add higher quality textures to make it look nicer, and that's kind of what we started gearing ourselves towards. So yes, you can come to expect more quality from the textures and what's in the games, or what's in the game itself, although we will still maintain that semi low poly style.
Yeah, that's kind of what you can, and you can see there's a rolling the way the textures look, the way they feel based upon the channel, the renders channel, which people can see, and that's just the look on the models. You can get an idea of what the future holds for the future of the game based upon the graphics and the renders. That said, not all those renders are in game. They are high quality Blender renders. but they are very close to what Unity can give us.
Yeah, 100%, and it's something that sort of any game in this stage of development for a lot of on an industry standard. One of the prime examples was actually Witcher 3, where for a large part of their development, it was just blocks. As they tested out different mechanics and different sort of the code, the aesthetics of any kind of form were not there, and was only later really made to have an emphasis and was brought to the priority. So we want to have the game to be beautiful, but we also want the game to run. And as it stands now, the game's got to run first and foremost, and that's the kind of stage of development we're at now. As we come closer to release date, that's when we'll be really emphasizing on making sure that everything we add to the game is beautiful, and everything that's already in the game is made to our high standards of quality.
The moment
Our
in
art
time,
director,
at the moment in time, it's function over beauty.
right? And then those two will be equalized, where we
Yeah.
will put perfect. Um,
A good rule of thumb I've been operating by is treat everything like it's in the game as a placeholder until we get a minimum viable product, because one of the last steps of both the modeling and the texturing section is going to be unifying and making everything look more consistent, like it's a part of one single style. So everything is considered a placeholder until we get that MVP out.
Yeah.
precisely. The next question by Arma Divine asks, will there be AI for guns, or will every gun have to be operated manually? There will be AI for guns, and that's something, again, to be decided as we test out sort of the mechanics of flight and then shooting mechanics. But it's very likely that we'll have AI for guns. Cyberknight asks, will there be an in-game coat room? Yes.
Yeah. There'll also be likely an in-game plan called the coat room. That I'm sure some members of the community will be trying to be the first person to set that up. As many of know, the coats have been part of ancient lore.
So yeah,
So
definitely coat rooms. We're listening. There will be coat rooms. In what shape or form? Again, that's to be decided. But there will be coat rooms.
a giant coat. There'll be a ship that looks like a giant coat stand.
Maybe, yeah. The Shadow Sage asks, where can new players get the latest news on the development of the game? Do you have a preferred platform, and is there a moderator team to help? So the latest news can be probably attained through either the Discord, through the newsletters that are going to come out on a regular basis, on the devblog forums, and whatever forum you get that, whether it's RSS or whatever.
And then
So there'll be multiple ways.
And then there'll be reposts of links to like the Reddit and Patreon.
Exactly. We wanna get the
Instagram
information.
as well.
Everybody. There'll be no excuse if somebody asks, "Hey, how's the development on Voids Adrift going?" There's many ways to attain it. There'll be no excuses.
The amount of reposting on different platforms, if you ask that question, you'd have to be blind.
Yeah, it would.
And living under a rock for several months, not to realise that there's
that
links
probably explains
everywhere.
the blindness.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. Crafty asks, where can I find the YouTube video and where do I support? So obviously for the people tuning into the YouTube, you already found it. Well done. Congratulations. Have a cookie. The YouTube video for our Discord members will be posted in the Discord, and will also be found on any of our social media platforms, whether it's Instagram or Reddit. And sort of they'll all be interlinked in a way, so you'll always be able to find it. And we also obviously suggest that you subscribe to get the regular updates. We're not going to inundate you with, especially on the YouTubes, we're not going to inundate you with updates and vlogs and videos or whatever that have no digestible information from them. We're going to make them sure they're short, sweet, and straight to the point. You get the information you need directly, and they're not you're not just sitting through however long.
It's really funny, but the Voyage Adrift YouTube channel has more subscribers than I do.
Interesting.
So, and I've been on YouTube since its inception.
Yeah, it's funny, but I suppose like an idea is worth 1,000 people or whatever the quote is. I suppose. Crafty asks.
I'll link that now.
Crafty asks, where can I? Sorry, my bad. Daily RPG asks, would you ever think about doing a Kickstarter to raise more funds for development? We would consider it, but not at the moment. Obviously, at MVP, and then post MVP, we may start exploring whether it's Kickstarter, whether it's publishers, things like that.
The chances are it won't be Kickstarter; it'll be Indiegogo, as Kickstarter has a all or nothing. So if we say we need, I'm just going to throw a number, just it's any number. If let's say we said we need 1,000 and we make 999, and the Kickstarter closes, we don't get any of that money. So I don't like that system, fortunately.
Yeah. It's something that again is to be decided, but at the moment there are no plans for it. But that also doesn't mean that we're saying no to it right now. I think we might actually stop the Q&A here. What are you thinking, Jack and Hollow? You wanna continue on? What is the community?
I'm just going through some of them. So we've been in-game reporting system. Yeah, we've already discussed that. That's going to happen. There'll be seasonal events such as there'll be like Christmas, Halloween, that sort of things. That's there's going to be things like that. You know, snow at Christmas, scary.
There was one question that asked if we were planning on doing seasons and seasonal effects. I know that Jack, you were planning a code that did real-time weather. Is seasons also going to be incorporated into that?
Seasons are going to be incorporated on that as well. So that's also going to be things. So you find more stormy weather and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, now, it'll be revolving as well. Like
we've also. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. Please go ahead.
I was saying we also got a couple questions about storm walls and wind walls of the like, separating zones. I forget if we discussed, are we doing weather walls or are we doing the tiered zones?
They're going to be weathered zones through. They're not walls, the weather floors and ceilings.
Right, so we're not doing zones like they were in World Adrift. We're doing floors and ceilings where it's a vertical versus a horizontal.
Yeah, so there's vertical and horizontal, and that falls into some advantage where you could escape a battle by falling because you can fall faster than you can rise. Gravity is on your side.
I'll say let's do that. Let's sort of pick Jack, if you want to pick your favorite sort of question from the list of questions to answer.
I'm just going through them because we are getting on for time. So one of the questions was, how do you make your models? And I think that question is aimed at Hollow. What software do we make our models in, Hollow?
So I make my models in Blender and ZBrush, although I use Blender more than ZBrush because I use ZBrush for more organic modeling. So I use Blender, and one of the modelers that I work with uses, what was it that, goodness gracious, what was it that Mr. Wiz uses? Homebrew, yes. He uses Homebrew, which is a more mechanical modeling software that you can export models out of. So,
and I use Blender, and sometimes when I'm feeling generous, I use Houdini.
Honestly, whatever you can get your hands on, be it a cracked version of ZBrush, a version of Blender for free, whatever you want to get your hands on, if you can get your hands on it, just go for it. I had somebody ask me in the other chat, how did I get started modeling?
What I will say is, and Wolf, you might agree, if you're going to produce models for the games industry, stay clear of Maya.
Yeah, well, stay clear of Maya until you get the job, and then that's all you'll be working with.
Stay clear of Maya.
Sorry.
Always stay with the free ones if you're gonna try and create models, to learn. Blender is your friend. It's free, and if you go to YouTube and type Blender tutorial, you'll be greeted with several thousand tutorials.
I actually linked in the QA discussion. I linked somebody by the name of Blender Guru. He is a great place to start because although he has you doing very simple models, the skills you learn there will carry over for the rest of your modeling career. And furthermore, a small piece of advice from a modeler who taught himself: learn how to do UVs sooner rather than later, because UVs are, especially if you want to do modeling for animation, for games, for anything that involves having models on a screen, learn to do UVs. You will thank yourself for teaching yourself sooner. They are a bit of a pain to do, but I promise you, you won't regret doing them.
Yeah,
I
UVs are a skill in itself.
I,
really,
I,
though.
I had to learn to do UVs on the fly, and I am kicking myself in the rear for not picking it up sooner because Lord knows I needed to learn to do them so much sooner.
Yeah.
Check your
My
DMs.
the software that I usually use is Maya. Well, I use ZBrush and then Maya, Marvelous Designer, Marmoset Toolbag. 4 came out actually, I think, a while ago. I haven't updated it since, and X Normals. Those are usually the software that I would commonly use. But yeah, Blender is your friend. Blender is your ally. Blender will never fail you. Blender will not leave you for the postman. Definitely, I think start on Blender, and then sort of the concepts that you learn in Blender can be
Blender's loyal.
translated later on. Blender is loyal. Can be learned later on. And just sort of a quick little note and reference. Obviously, we don't advocate for any cracking of any software or something like that. But
Okay. When I was looking for the word trial, but I forgot
free
it
trials.
in
There
my
we
head.
go. Yes.
So I
Yes.
said the word cracked because I didn't know what else to call it. That was my bad.
It's it's free trials.
I
Free
think
trials.
ZBrush offers a 30-day free trial, but if you get really hooked on it, and you really like how it works, I hope you can afford it. I'd use Blender; it's free.
Yeah, I'm paying tooth and nail for my Autodesk, 3ds Max, Maya, Marvelous Designer, all these data. Oh boy, I pay more in those softwares than I pay in my rent. So if that's any consolation, then
Don't think you can make. Don't think you can make game. I don't think you can make. Oh, you can actually. I don't recommend it though. If you're gonna do it, stay clear. Don't make models for games in Google SketchUp.
that's
Just not a
pretty
good idea.
So my favorite question from the list of questions, just as we're sort of shorter on time here, sorry. Lando asks, and this is something that I've been, kind of one of the biggest things for me as a debut game designer, taking on, sort of more of a lead as opposed to being in the background of other projects in the past, is his question is as follows: I know development is early, but what is your stance on NPCs, like animals/enemies in the sky that you can kill and maybe harvest resources from? And if there are missions, will those be accepted/managed through something like a terminal? Or will there be NPCs that you can accept missions from? So, and this is where this is perhaps something a bit more newer, and sort of as more details get released, this will become more apparent. But there will be a sizable amount of NPCs. So Drainage, one of our modelers, I've been working closely with him on getting him to be sort of a more focused NPC player character modeler, and sort of teaching him the skills that are needed for that. We really want to introduce cultures and sort of settlements that really help bring, alongside the economy that we spoke about earlier, that bring this world to life. And a big part of that are going to be NPCs, and the AI and the dialogue and the voice acting and all these things, obviously determined on the access of funding that we have and the time that we have for these things. But it's a huge interest of mine to really develop that field of the overall game design. So I think that's something that you can really look forward to. Having these cultures that are inspired by real world cultures and getting to experience all these cities and villages in whatever form they take, traveling from island to island, and the different interactions that will take place. It's going to be cool. It's going to be really, really cool.
I'm going to answer two more questions, and that's going to be me. Wildcard asks, is there going to be any limits on ship builds, weapon counts, amounts of armor, amount of engines or size? Not really. So there's not going to be a limit on how many ship builds you can have, because you can store these on the workshop. You can only have one active ship at a time. So you can only fly one ship, because you can only be owner of one ship, because only one ship is spawned and one ship is despawned. Weapon counts are, again, how big's your inventory? You can store these items in your bank, and your bank will have a limited amount of supply, or vault, as you call it. Amounts of armor, again, there'll be like head, shoulders, knees and toes, or armor counts. Again, all about how much you can store in your bank or on your persons. And then your engines. No, there's no limit on how many engines you can have on a ship. But you got to remember, each engine will weigh a certain amount, and each engine's going to need fuel. So the more engines you have, the more fuel tanks you're going to need. The more fuel tanks you have, the more fuel you're going to need. And the more fuel tanks and engines you have, the more heavier your ship is. So the more drag you have, so the more engines you're going to need. Again, you're going to find a balance. So yes, you could just have a ship that's just made up of engines. Sure, it's a meme ship. I'm seeing a lot of people post bricks. So yes, if you want a brick with engines, go for it. But yeah, that's the limitations. And then the other questions was, will there be a single player? Yes, there will be a single player. It won't be as big as the multiplayer. There will be there'll still be the zones, but it won't be several thousands of islands you can explore. It's possibly something we'd look in the future, maybe procedurally generating the islands for you in single player. Again, we'd have to look at that, make sure that's properly made and done properly. But yeah, there will be an offline mode, so to speak, because again, there are some people who just don't like people. So
That's true.
yeah,
And we want to, it's definitely our main focus is the MMO, but having a single player and having that, something that you can have online and, sort of fly around and sort of just relax maybe a little bit if social interaction and the social aspect that we're very focused on in this game is not for you, there will be ways where you can still experience a lot of the mechanics, etc. And maybe that will be an evolved form of the MVP or something akin to that. Again, that is something to be decided. Was there anything else, Jack? Do you have any closing remarks? I know that this QA has taken on sort of 2 hours, and for our YouTube audience, this will be maybe edited a little bit down. Make sure that the most important information is getting across, so you're not listening to 2 hours of us just
yeah.
talking.
There's just noticed there is one more question, and the ship size cap. There'll be it's not really a size; it's a complexity cap. So every so there'll be a set size of a ship based upon complexity. So you can't make a ship with 1 million panels on it, but still be the size of a small cube. It'll be based upon complexity and not limited on size. So yes, you could have a really long brick, but it's about how complex. There will be a max size of a ship as well. We don't want people making ships the size of islands. Although a Death Star would be cool, but no, not going to happen.
And a lot of these things will obviously, as we get closer to sort of testing out in early access, in alpha and beta tests, that's something that we'll constantly review and reevaluate.
There is, and yeah, someone else has asked, will there be cosmetics in the game? Yeah, there'll be cosmetics. Again, that'll be the community designed, community approved, and then it'll be on Steam, so you can add them in game.
Right, and we'll never have a pay to win.
No.
So, that's something that hasn't really been raised. I don't think. I know there was a question kind of referencing it earlier that I saw, but there will be no aspect of the, this will be recorded. There'll be no aspect of the game that is pay to win at all. So there will be perhaps maybe a cosmetic shop in which there'll be no discernible advantage to having these cosmetics, other than changing the form of your character or the clothes and whatnot. They'll still fit within the theme of the game. They'll still be aesthetically in line. You're not going to have one of those cosmetic shops that all of a sudden you've got this wacky hat that's doesn't really fit and kind of breaks the immersion of the game. We're not going to be having that, but we'll definitely have some cool things on there that people will feel like, hey, this is me worth spending a couple of bucks to get. I'm looking at my character all day. I don't mind doing this, and that's kind of where we're at with any kind of cosmetic shop, and the person who will be designing that will most likely be Hollow. But to sort of close this Q&A, and obviously this has been a bit of a longer QA just because this has been like our first, let's say, proper QA. So naturally there have been a lot of questions in the community and a lot of people being brought up to speed. The QAs in the future will be a lot shorter, and we'll maybe be able to include some kind of more community participation. It's apologies that we weren't able to do that in this one. But I think, should we start with Hollow? Is there any sort of closing remarks that you would like to give?
Not that I can think of. I think that just about covers everything. If you guys have any other questions, we'll be sure to do another one of these in the future. And any modeling concerns, you can always drop it in our regular chats, and we'll see what we can do about answering them.
Exactly. Jack?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to keep posting updates everywhere in each channel. I will add, some people might have noticed in the last few weeks that the Discord has changed. We've had a big change up on not deleting channels, but we've organized the Discord to make it a little easier for everybody to work with. As someone has pointed out in the past, this Discord used to have 157 channels, which is too many. So we are still cleaning up. We are migrating some of the stuff over to the forums as well. So if you're wondering where a certain channel has gone, it's because either it was inactive or it just didn't get used. And also we've updated our rules and our frequently asked questions, which will be updated now since we've had a few people ask in the Q&A side that they've asked the same question several times. So we'll update that as well to reflect on today's questions, which can be found here on our Discord. As this is a recording and there is bound to be someone asking, what's the Discord? It's discord.gg/voidsadrift.
The link will most likely be on in the description of any wherever you're viewing this later on in the future.
It's the most asked question. What's the link in the Discord? Obviously, that's not going to get put on the frequently asked questions because you're here. I don't know how you got here without putting the link in, but hey.
There you go.
So we are going to wrap up at 2 a.m. I think. That's a good time. 4 minutes from now to make it on point. Wolf, any closing remarks?
Just would like to thank the community. I've received a lot of amazing messages, people welcoming me, and the development team has been sort of very kind to me so far. I'm sure that will change, and as I start, sort of being harder on people and whatnot, then maybe that relationship will change. But I'm very excited to be working with everybody on this, and I thank the team and the community again for this opportunity, and I'd like to give a special thanks to all the supporters as well for their financial contributions in making this, world possible. And yeah, it's just I'm looking forward to this, Nomads. I'm looking forward to this. Yeah, that's I suppose my closing remarks done. And if there are any further questions, please shoot away. We'll maybe start answering the questions in sort of when we have time. leave this question time open for a little bit for anybody who didn't get their question answered in this specific QA. And we'll be holding another QA probably quite shortly after 0.16 release, which I hope everybody is excited for. So, with that, I think I'd like to stay safe out there, nomads.
On that last subject, just going on the social side now. There's a lot of people posting photos of bricks. I'm sorry for the people, the listeners of this who aren't in the Discord, but there's currently a lot of people posting bricks, which I think is becoming the new coats. You know, people. That's it now. When people join a server, it says, "Hey, welcome to Voids Adrift Discord. May I take your brick?" It's going to be a reference that people don't understand. But yeah,
Is that not how memes work though? They just evolve over time.
well, people were building ships, and people go, "Oh, I hope there's no box meta," but now it's going to be brick meta.
Like I said in the chat, if they keep up with this whole brick deal, they might get some brick themed cosmetics in the future. I don't know.
I think it's to be excited for. If they, as they say, if you can't beat them, you brick them.
Amen.
The builder sort of outfit you can wear, and there'll be builders building bricks.
Well, yeah. So thank you all for attending, and that's it from Zavinet. So yeah, again, stay safe out there, nomads.
Y'all have a great night now.
Yeah. We're going to leave the question time up after the Q&A is over. If what I'll say, Wolf, to that stretch goal is that if every single person in this Discord currently upvotes Furin's question, I'd definitely consider putting it in for the MVP.